All right, so we're looking at 7.5 on 386. And if you recall, we looked at our poster up there of all the I can statements coming out of it. We are factoring. Okay, we're continuing to factor, which means breaking things up into what times what. Okay, so if you look at the I can statement for today, we're talking about I can factor, and it's that specific situation. X squared plus bx plus c. Okay, so it's going to be a trinomial, and we are going to factor. And there's not even going to be a number in front of the x squared. B and x stand for numbers. Okay, so it's going to be pretty straightforward today. Once you get the hang of it, it's going to be no problem at all. We just got to learn how to do it first. To get there, the first thing I want you to do is I want you to FOIL a couple of problems. I want you to FOIL those two, and then we're going to work off of those. Start. Okay, go ahead, double check somebody, make sure they got said thing. All right, here we go. Regina, what do we get for that first one? Catch it. Okay, there you go. How about that second one? What do we get, John? Perfect. Okay, so this is what, before the quiz, these were the types of problems that we saw. Now what we're going to do is we're going to see this as the problem, and we have to go backwards and create this. Okay, that's what we're doing today. So this is that x squared plus bx plus c that we talked about in the I can statement. So we're going to take this, we're going to factor. So what I want you to do is I want you to look at these numbers, okay, the numbers that were in the parentheses, because the x is always going to be x today. It's always just going to be x and x today, because that's always going to be an x squared. So I want you to look at those numbers, and I want you to look at the results of our problem. And I want you to talk to somebody, and how can we get those numbers, the circle and the square, based off of the numbers in our parentheses?
Okay, so when you solution to number 7, I would add the second number. And then plus 10 time, and then for the x squared, you always know x squared. That's the same as the problem. And then once you spend those two terms that are the variables added together, the other ones are just.
All right, so how do I get the numbers in the square? How do I get the numbers that are squared up there based off of the numbers that are underlined? You multiply them together, right? 5 times 2 gives me 10. 10 times 3 gives me 30. How do I get the numbers that are circled there, Ben? You add them together. 5 plus 2 is 7. 10 plus 3 is 13. So this is always going to be the case, where you're going to multiply these two numbers together to get here, add them to get here. Right? So when we start going the other way, we see this as our problem, and we need to come up with our sets of parentheses. Again, today, because there's no number, there's no leading coefficient, it's just a 1. It's always going to be an x and x to start. And so we're going to be looking at factors of the last number. Remember what multiplies together to give you that last number, that add up to give me the middle number. So if we need to, we can write out those factors. Otherwise, we can do it in our head. Factors of 10 are 1 and 10, 2 and 5. And then we see which pair of those adds up to 7. 2 and 5. Okay, so we've got that. That's going to be our answer today. Is the x plus 2, x plus 5. Okay. Good.
The guy used to actually in parentheses.
Do they have to be in parentheses? Yes.
Do we have to put a multiplication sign in between?
No. You don't need to put a multiplication in between. If there's no symbol in between, then we assume that it's multiplication. Okay. Yeah.
Wouldn't it be x plus 5 and x plus 2 instead of 5? Or x?
It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. If I switch these around, it's the exact same thing. Yep. Okay, so that's what we're looking at today. So let me give you a couple problems. See if we can figure these out. All right, go ahead, see if you can figure out what those parentheses are going to be. Remember, you're looking for factors of the last number that add up to equal the middle number. Talk to somebody about it. See if they got the same thing. Did I ask? Okay. Where's you have the first one? What do we have for the first one here, Ben?
1 and 7.
Okay, so x plus 1, x plus 7. Just make sure that when you're writing it down on the test or whatever, you're not just writing 1 and 7. Right? X plus 1, x plus 7. How about our second one here? Then,
X plus 6, X plus 9.
nope. That would be 54. 54. Andrew,
X plus 8 times X plus 7.
there you go. X plus 8, x plus 7. Okay, multiply to give me 56, add to give me 15. There you go. Good. And again, if we need to, then write out your factors. The better you are at your multiplication facts, the easier this is going to be. If you're one that needs a calculator to do 8 times 4, then this becomes a little harder, right? Because now you're using a calculator all the time to try to figure out what those factors are. Okay. All right. Then,
If my last number, the one that would be squared, is 1 less than the one next to X, is it always just going to be the?
it's going to have to be. It's going to be have to be that and 1. Yeah. Right. Yeah, that's a good observation there. Right. If this is 1 more than that, that's going to have to be that number times 1. Yeah. Good. You're good. And 7's prime, so the only choice you have is 1 and 7. So that helps. All right. No decimals, no fractions. All right, let's look at something slightly different here, right? Do a negative at you this time.
Oh, no.
Change it up a little bit. Okay, talk to somebody about it.
It's funny, I just tried to figure out how to use the negative seven. I sat it and I realized.
Actually, negative was yeah.
Okay, here we go. Again, what do we get in our parentheses here? AJ,
X minus 3 and X minus 4.
there you go. And remember, it doesn't matter which parenthesis is which. It doesn't matter as long as you have an x minus 3 and an x minus 4. So when looking at this, what does this last, when this last term is positive, what does that tell us for sure? What has to be true if that last term is positive, Jenna? Well, either negative or positive, right? But both of them have to be the same. Okay, they have to be the same sign. So if this is positive, I'm gonna model note taking, right? Just because I don't write something on the board doesn't mean you shouldn't be writing it. If you find it important, write it down. This is the sort of stuff that I would write down, right? If we talk about, if this is positive, then both factors have the same sign, right? And you can write different things. You don't have to write it word for word, but the idea is there, right? If you need something written down, it needs to be something that's going to help you when you see this in a week when you're studying for the test. Okay, or when you see this in 3 months when you're studying for finals. Okay, you got to have stuff down that's going to help you. Just having this doesn't necessarily help you. Words kind of help a little bit better sometimes. So if this is positive, both factors have the same sign. This is the sign. Okay, so if that last term is positive, then both of your factors are going to have that sign. If it's negative, they're both going to be negative. If it's a positive, they're both going to be positive. So we can tell a lot just by looking at the signs of our original question. And we can tell whether they should both be positive or both be negative. And that brings us to our new situation. Okay, now this is something different. We've got a -5 and a -14. Raise your hand. What do you think this means in terms of the signs of our factors? What do you think this means here, Curtis?
One's positive.
Yeah, one's going to be positive, one's going to be negative. All right. So if this is negative, one is positive, one is negative, right? Because they need to multiply together to give me a negative. So one has to be positive, one has to be negative. What else can I tell for sure based on this equation right here, Finn? Exactly, the bigger one has to be negative because they're going to add up to be a negative. So the bigger factor is going to be negative. Bigger factor is negative because that middle sign is negative. If that middle sign was positive, then the bigger factor is positive. Okay, so this last term tells you whether the signs are going to be the same or the signs are going to be different. In this case, they're going to be different. And we know that the bigger one is going to be negative. And when I say bigger, I mean further away from 0. Okay, not like on a number line, greater or less than. Okay, we know that 7 is bigger than 2. So our factors here, right? We know that the bigger one has to be negative. So if you want to write them down, you can. 1 and -14, 2 and -7. Those are the only options now. Right? We know they have to add up to -5, so it's got to be 2 and -7. So x plus 2, x minus 7. So those signs play a role. Those signs are very important because they help us to know right away what kind of numbers we're looking for. Otherwise, it's just guess and check. And we don't want to have to guess and check when we don't have to. So we want to limit our educated guesses here to these two instead of a whole bunch of them. All right, any questions right now on this? Okay, we are not done. We got a couple last things here we gotta talk about. I want you to tell the person next to you, what do you know for sure about the signs in both of these? And then solve it.
Oh, yeah.
So it's.
And then go ahead and solve it.
When you add those together, then that's how you.
Wrong. Sometimes that second one trips us up a little bit. Remember, that's a 1 in the middle, a -1 in the middle. All right, what do we get for x squared plus 2x minus 15 here? Xander?
X plus 5 and X minus 3.
X plus 5, x minus 3. Good. We know the signs have to be different. We know the bigger one has to be positive. There you go. So those multiply to give me -15, add to give me a +2. How about the second one here? Kayla?
X minus 7 and X plus 6.
There you go. It's a v this time, just be careful on it. So v minus 7, v plus 6. Okay, there you go. Anytime that middle number is a 1, that means your two numbers have to be right next to each other. All right, they got to be consecutive numbers, so 7 and 6 this time. All right, the last thing that we got to talk about is taking it one step further and seeing a problem like this. Okay, if you see a problem like this where it's equal to 0, we're going to do what we just did. So if you recall, this one ended up being x plus 2, x minus 7, but that's still equal to 0. So now because we have that equal sign, it's the 0 product property. Ellen?
Wait, is the smaller or bigger one positive?
It depends on what this sign is,
Oh,
right? So this sign is a negative, so the bigger one's negative. This is positive, bigger one's positive. Okay. So once we're here, right, we have it equal to 0, 0 product property. We know our answers are -2 and a +7. Okay, it's just taking that one extra step. If you see that equal sign, we got to figure out what they are. Just be careful. The tendency is just to factor and say, all right, my factors that work here are -7 and 2, and put those as the answer. And those aren't your answers, right? That's what goes in the parentheses, and then we can get our answers. Okay, just be careful on that. Make sure. Make it equal 0 first. Before you do anything else on these, if there's an equal sign, you need to make it equal 0. You need to move everything over to one side and make it equal 0 before you try to factor. Just like we talked about on that one on the quiz, right? Get it all over to one side, make it equal 0, and then you can solve. Okay. Any questions about this? Okay, go ahead.